Community and Active Werkzeug 1.4. Nagel and Wickmark, Keep the Flame Burning. Communities in Decline. Only 3 books in 26 years did they produce back then. And significantly, one of them was a hymnal, the Salvaspiel. And then the New Werkzeug and the Reawakening. And then the United States. Again, look at that explosion of books once the communal system was started. They were producing in 1855 to 1864. You got to put this in perspective. They were doing 4.6 books a year, okay, in that period. And this was the time they were moving the entire community from New York to Iowa. Okay, they were buying and selling land. They were trying to sell off Ebenezer. They were building 7 villages in Iowa, and during the Civil War. Okay, and they still were able to print that many books. I just find it amazing. Then if you look at the bottom line here, kind of definitely after the communal system, no more printing, right? That wasn't an economically viable thing anymore, so they stopped. And not until really then the transition to English and translations did the church start publishing again. Now I got way ahead of my notes. Give me a second. But the publication efforts of the Inspirationists, I think, can be seen in several contexts. But the most general context is that generally Protestants put a big emphasis on reading, on devotional reading and the printed word. That was part of the Protestant Reformation and Luther, that unlike in the Catholic religion, they put a big emphasis on literacy and the individual being able to read the Bible his or herself. This is actually the frontispiece of that collection of poetry by Johann Wilhelm Petersen. I show it because of the angel. This is bringing the good news. Behold, I bring you good tidings, the everlasting gospel. And if you see the form it takes, it's a book. Okay? The good news comes in the form of a book. Okay? For Protestants, that's very important. Also for Pietists, for the Pietists background of our church, I call this, this is a frontispiece. It's a copper plate engraving made in front of at the beginning of that Kempis, that Thomas à Kempis volume. I call this the Holy Pietist Trinity. Okay, it's got Jesus, children, and books. Okay, I mean, that whole notion that the book is where a child is going to find the right way to live and is going to find Jesus by reading in a book. Inspiration has also had another notion which shows up over and over again in their publications, and that's the idea that the act of printing brings truth to light, okay, or brings knowledge out of darkness into the light of day. This title page here says, it's before it even gets to the main title, okay? It says, what has been kept in manuscript is now through print revealed. Okay, that whole notion that it's bringing truth to light. We see this over and over again. In the title page of the Salvaspiel, of the 8th edition of the Salvaspiel, it doesn't just say 8th edition, it says, zum 8. Mal an Licht gegeben, okay, brought to light for the 8th time. That notion that printing is a revealing, an illuminating action. And then, of course, specific to our church is this whole notion of transmitting our community heritage and spiritual experience to the next generation. This transgenerational transmission of the historical experience. And Christian Metz's testimony is what that's all about. Now, I know for the Heritage Society, we've always used that for kind of our motto, or as it were, but there's some things left out in that Heritage Society quote that I want to emphasize here, and that is, bring your heritage into good order, so that here and there a soul may find guiding grace, spiritual improvement, and strength. Okay? That's why you're preserving this stuff. And then, the blessed work of preservation is of primary importance, without which the work will be lost, and nevermore shall there be a united membership and brotherhood. Okay? That, I think, really sums up the idea of for the testimony and the notion that you have to preserve this for your children. Gather the lost and the hidden and preserve it for your children. And what are they talking about? They're talking about the written word. Not only printed material, but also manuscripts. Many, many people in communal Amana took up the pen after this testimony and started copying stuff. We've got thousands of pages of 19th century manuscripts that are copying the 18th century stuff. Okay, so that they did not want to forget their German experience when they came to America. This is specifically in response to that expatriation, Germany to America. Let's not forget what happened back there. Let's not forget the sacrifices all these people made so that we could be here. So this is a very important testimony, and I think kind of gives that divine imprimatur to the publication efforts of the inspirationists. And that transgenerational aspect is shown, I think, in another example. The last book published in communal Amana is a children's catechism. Okay? You know, they already kind of knew the communal system wasn't going to make it, but they were still thinking about the edification of the children. And significantly, the first English translation published is the English translation of that same catechism. I think that shows that concern for that transmission from one generation to the next. And to keep all the stuff, they built a special building, the archive building, right next to where the print shop was and where the book bindery is, so that they actually dedicated resources to house this stuff, right close to the church and the book bindery. And then, of course, one of the other main reasons they were printing this stuff was to help build the community, as in the Christian Metz testimony, to unite the membership. And in order to do that, they needed individuals to have these books. So they built special pieces of furniture so that people could keep their books. And there we have it open. Now it is brought to light. And that's actually my grandmother's big ashram. And, probably 70, she didn't have every book, but, of the 314 books, she probably had 250 or so. So it's pretty amazing, really. So I haven't mentioned, I guess it goes without saying, it must go without saying because I didn't say it. but all this stuff is in German, okay? That one thing I showed you, that's the only English language you find in any of these books. They must have gotten this ornament here from someplace in Buffalo, okay? Because it's the only English language you see in any of these inspirationist books, except the brief history. The first edition of this was in 1900. It's really just more like a pamphlet. But this was obviously meant not for the membership, not to unite the membership, not to build community, but to explain themselves to outsiders. And in order to do that, this is really the only publication that in communal times that is geared to the outside world rather than to their own membership. And this actually went through 4 editions. It's interesting. The first edition in 1900. This edition, the third during World War II, is very interesting because you notice it says revised. Yeah. They left out all reference to German language because of that. I find that very interesting how they were kind of catering to the anti-German sentiment by leaving out all reference to German language. In the 4th edition in 1930, it kind of anticipates the reorganization. It's talking, the revisions there are talking about how youth are dressing more modern, boys are playing baseball. You kind of see that things are changing in the 4th edition. Very interesting, very short, the only one that's meant for outsiders to read other than the community. So, in conclusion, yes, there is a conclusion. How did we do ever? Did we lose? Oh, darn. Okay, well then I'll try to end on an upbeat note. The book production and the print shop generally, is central to community life, to its devotional, liturgical, spiritual life, but also to the economic and social life of the community. I didn't even go into, but the print shop was printing a lot more stuff than just books, which puts the book production even more fantastic, I think, that they were doing all this other stuff. We often focus on the built environment of the colonies, of the communal system and the communal organization, but we have to remember that while they were building and organizing a physical community with villages and industries and farmland, they were also producing a community literary heritage, and we shouldn't overlook that. So I want to end with just one last look at this graph. Not because it's my favorite graph ever, but because it's, I think, very telling. The fact that communal book production correlates so strongly with that with the communal system. It exploded with the institution of communalism, and it ended when the communalism ended. It's not merely a coincidence. For the inspirationists, the communal system and books served the same purpose. Communalism in Ebenezer and Amana was not an end in itself. There was no ideology of communalism, of communal living, of trying to create a utopian society or to create an alternative to mainstream society. Rather, it was a means to an end. The communal living was seen as a way to facilitate an individual's pilgrimage to salvation, okay? That it would be easier to reach salvation living this way than living in the outside world. They wanted to build a community separate from the outside world in which they could unite its members in love and become one in Christ. Okay? That's why they set up the communal system, and that's why they publish books. Thanks.
Does anybody have any questions for Lenny? I have one.
Yeah.
Did your friend, how long does it take to bind a book? So when they were binding like 150 schools, how long do you think it takes to bind a book like this fat?
Hours, but less than a day.
Still.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Interesting. What Gary, my friend, the bookbinder friend, he says in a lot of places in America, actually, women worked in the bookbinderies. They did the actual sewing and stuff. But we have no evidence at all that any women worked in the bookbindery, and we have no evidence that they hired anybody. They've depended on the expertise within the community to make it all happen. All right, thanks.
While we're